Good evening, everyone. It is once again Ted the Speed Learner, and tonight I'm going to start a video series on remote control symbols because of modern day televisions and Roku sticks, and on top of that, Comcast itself has a device called a Flex. It's just like, well, it's a lot like a Roku stick. They have the Amazon Fire Stick, so on and so forth. Okay? And this is the reason why, because elderly people today, it's sad to say, but elderly people today just do not know how to operate all these little devices because they don't know why the symbols are there and what they mean. And I'm going to go through that tonight. Okay? And the first symbol I'm going to go through is the rewind and the fast forward symbols, and I'm going to use a visual aid, and this is my visual aid right here. And I'm going to use this. This is actually a VHS tape, and I know that there are a lot of elderly people that have seen VHS tapes like this. Okay? And when you use VHS tapes like this, you can then begin to see why they created the symbols that they did. Now, why did they create these symbols at all? Okay? The reason they did that is because if you were to hand one of these remotes, okay, whether it be a television remote or a Roku remote or a Blu-ray DVD player remote, the reason why that they have these symbols on there is because if you were to give the same remote to somebody in Great Britain or in France or in Germany or any of these other countries on the other side of the world, they would be able to successfully operate those remotes based on those symbols. Whoa! Okay, let's go back to our visual aid because I know every one of you elderly people today are familiar with the VHS tape. This is the left reel of the tape. This is the right reel. Now, for those of you, I can't even imagine anybody alive today that doesn't know what a VHS tape is or how it actually operates. But if you really don't, and that's okay, if you really don't, let me say this for you. Now, there were cassette tapes even before that. So any of you people that grew up in the 60s or even the late 50s, you're familiar with cassette tapes. I'm absolutely guaranteeing that. And the tape, the actual tape inside the cartridge here, would go from the left reel to the right one. Okay? Now, here's the reason why I say that. Because if you are reading a book, and I know some of you, okay, let's say you're from the back of the 50s or even back of the 40s. Fine. That's great. Let's go back even further than that. Let's say you never had encountered a tape, which I can't imagine why somebody that came from the 1950s or 40s had never encountered a cassette tape. That doesn't even make sense. But even if you didn't, okay, fine. Let's say you did. You still read books. I read books. And if I read books, that means you read books. Okay. Which direction do you read your text? Okay? Do you read your text from left to right or right to left? Well, if you live here in the United States or in England or in France or in Germany or in Spain, you're going to read your text from left to right. But in the Middle East and in some Chinese countries, well, not Chinese, Asian countries is what I was trying to say. Asian countries, my mistake, sorry about that. But in some Asian countries, you actually read your text from right to left. Like, wait a minute. That's bizarre. It's true. Alright, but here in the States, in Mexico, in Canada, in every European country you can think of, they always read their text from left to right. Well, that's why they designed these, from left to right. You don't see the tape going back this way unless you're rewinding the tape. When you're playing a tape, it always goes from the left spool to the right spool. Always. Okay? Now, yes, if you're rewinding, it goes from right to left, but if you are playing the tape, it always goes from left to right. Now then, When these people decided, back in, I would say, probably the early 1980s, if not even back in the 1970s, to design these little symbols, that doesn't look right. That just looks like a triangle. Let's do this right. Oh, that was terrible. Yeah. Okay. Now, what they had originally was in mind the arrow. Just like that. Okay? But they didn't want to draw a massive arrow like this because they didn't have enough room on the button, because these buttons are small. Okay? They didn't have enough room to make that particular symbol. But if you look at this, that's a triangle there. And that triangle is pushing forward. So, this is fast forward. Okay? So when you see this symbol here, it will always be fast forward. Now, I want you to go ahead at this time, and I want you to pick up your remotes. Your television remote, your Roku remote, your DVD player remote, you're going to find those symbols are exactly the same. So whichever remote you're operating, the symbols are going to be exactly the same. Okay? This is fast forward. This is rewind. If you'll look at your old-time VCRs, look at their remotes. Look on the actual VCR itself. Often you will see these symbols. Okay? When the triangles are pointing this way, it's fast forward. When they're pointing this way, it's rewind. So, if the triangles are pointing this way, it's fast forward. When you push that fast forward, the tape is moving very rapidly from the left spool to the right spool. When the symbols are pointing the opposite direction, the tape is rapidly moving from the right spool to the left spool. That's why it points in the opposite direction. And that's your lesson for this evening. Alright. There will be an actual, and you may have already seen it, there's an actual box in the upper right corner of this video that if you click it, will take you to the next lesson. So I would like for you to do that, and I will tell you more in the next lesson, so I'd like for you to stay tuned.